I'm the CEO of RJ Reliance. In this series, I'm talking with business owners, operators, HCM leaders, employees, partners, and industry experts about how work is changing. We'll look at people, systems, payroll, HR, time, integrations, operations, and yes, AI, but always from a practical business perspective. The goal is simple: understand what companies should be thinking about as they modernize how work gets done. All right, today I'm talking with someone who helps HCM, payroll, time, HR, and workforce technology projects move from idea to reality. We'll talk about what makes these projects succeed, where they get hard, and what business leaders should understand before modernizing systems or adding artificial intelligence and automation. So with me today is Jabari Phillips. Hey, Jabari, can you introduce yourself and share just a little bit about your background and experience?
Yes, my name is Jabari Phillips. I'm a project manager for about 9 years, primarily working in the IT spaces with project management, working on larger enterprise initiatives. I also have experience with networking and infrastructure, and then just a whole lot of software as a service and integration and implementation experience. So looking forward to working with the org.
All right, fantastic. So I know a lot of your experience is tied really around integration. So we'll really make sure to touch on that as we move through, as well as all the other facets from a technology basis. So we'll make sure to touch on that on today's call. So tell me a little bit about what does your role look like during an implementation or system change?
It's typically acting as the voice of the company and the voice and being the face for the client to interact with and for them to have a point of contact. It's a very cross-functional role, working with sometimes engineers, developers, testers, QA, and then obviously working with business leadership and sales or customer success. So working internally with all those different teams to understand what the requirements are of the product, and then working with the client to understand what their requirements are as far as operationally, how the product should work. So just bridging that gap I feel like that's my role typically, and just having enough technical acumen to make sure that I'm able to translate the requirements from the business to the client, and they understand that in a way that doesn't scare them. So that's the ultimate goal, is to make sure that we're working towards our deliverables and handing our clients hand essentially, but giving them the guidance as well to do what they need to do on their end to complete the things that they're accountable for too along the way.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. So when you start a new project, any sense of what the clients are hoping to fix, especially as it pertains to HCM or payroll projects? I know a lot of it is kind of moving away from like manual processes as an example and building an automation. Would you kind of agree that's what you're seeing as well?
I would agree. I'd say that it seems like a lot of our clients are looking to bridge the gap between different systems that don't communicate currently, and have a consistent data feed between systems. And I think that's the gap that a lot of our clients are facing and that we can help them with.
Awesome. And then in terms of you as a project manager have very unique perspective in terms of seeing a lot of the project more from at the 30,000, 50,000 foot level down to the 100-foot level. And from that perspective, what do you think that you as a project manager see that the client's executives or the client's end users may not always see? Any thoughts there?
So I'm still pretty new to the process here, and I haven't actually had a kickoff yet, so it's kind of hard to say. From the observations that I've had watching other calls with PMs and their clients, it seems like a lot of times they forget that the requirements that we're giving them are typically like milestones that must be hit in order to progress further. So if there's any type of delay within the timing of their implementation or integration, it may be caused by them not providing what we have asked for. So I've noticed that can be sometimes an issue, but yeah.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's really the piece of it, is that I think as the clients kind of go into this, their eyes are completely on the end result and not necessarily knowing all the steps that happen in between, essentially the start and the end process, right? And to your point, if there's delays here, that causes a critical chain of events that impact the project possibly in a negative way. So that may impact that kind of end goal or delivery timeframe at the very least. So I think from that standpoint, and I know you're newer to your new role at RJ Reliance, but I'm sure in your 9 years of experience, you've seen the same thing. It's like, clients not fully understanding, like, all right, you need to do these in these particular order to ensure the success.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So continuing on the success theme, what would you say makes a project run smoothly, an HCM project or just a project in general run smoothly? What, in your experience, what would you say there?
I would say a constant feedback loop between clients, PM, and the internal team, internal stakeholders. Just constantly having the feedback loop where we're discussing what we're working towards, what goals or activities or actions we're working towards, where some of our hurdles, what's our roadblocks, and just keeping that conversation frequent and ongoing until we reach a resolution, whatever it may be. I think that's one of the biggest things in project management in general. With any project is keeping your stakeholders engaged, making sure that you have a proper communication plan in place, but also like some sort of knowledge behind your stakeholder matrix. Who should you be going to when you need to get an answer? Who can escalate certain things? And who should be at the table when it's time to make a decision. I think that's important to have that established early on.
Yeah, I think you hit everything I was going to cover, even in my next question, which is clear ownership, clear timelines, clear communication, and who has the decision-making authority, and making sure that those key stakeholders are really part of and integrated into the project. So what happens when a company does not have the right people involved? And I think maybe that's an obvious answer, but just in your experience, if they're not bringing in and assembling the right kind of team, even on their side, or just engaging the right kind of key stakeholders in a project, what are your thoughts around that?
I would say it leads to delays. Delays in gathering the proper requirement. Well, I should say it leads to delays, but it also leads to errors in requirements gathering. People don't have the ability to voice their opinion or voice their concerns about how something is going to be done. And we may overlook something that's, a configuration setting that they currently have that may be forgotten of, or a data feed that we didn't know existed and we are not transferring over because we're not aware of that. So it is important to have the right people at the table. Because again, I guess with what I think with requirements gathering, especially, we need to get that information from everyone who has that knowledge of how the system is currently working, and then also how they would like it to work in the future state. So, yeah.
Yeah, and expanding on that aspect of it. So where you're looking at process gaps or data issues, where do they tend to show up during a project in your experience? Is it presumably earlier on in a project? If you're going to have a process gap or data issue, what are your thoughts around that?
I mean, I think I've seen it all throughout a project. It can be early on in the discovery phase where, there's information that we need and we can't get it from the right person because they don't know, they just haven't experienced that product or service or feature. And it could impact us later down the line, even post go live, if we've realized that the configuration or the functionality is missing for a certain department or stakeholder that wasn't involved. That can also be an issue. So I think that could happen at any point throughout a project, but it's important to make sure that you early on try to get everyone involved that should be, to avoid that. But you may discover that later on in the project that you didn't have the right answers you didn't have the right person in the room,
Right.
during a configuration or something. So I think early on it's important to really hash that out.
Yeah, and it's great where you have very tenured project managers like yourself who have gone down those paths during your career in terms of seeing where projects have gone sideways and being able to provide that thought leadership and guidance for projects to hopefully avoid getting that process gap or data issue near the end, which causes obviously a lot more churn and potentially redevelopment and stuff. So moving into probably one of my favorite topics, of course, is artificial intelligence and the automation layer. So as AI and automation become more common, how do you think that changes the projects, the HCM projects that you're going to be working on a go forward basis? Any kind of thoughts that you have there?
I would hope that it would make the integration process easier in the future. I think that's kind of the only information I can have, or kind of input I
Yeah.
have now in its current usage, was that I would hope that I don't know what we're doing with it at this point in with its integration, so it's kind of hard to say. But in the future, I would anticipate that it would help maybe formalize some of the communication that goes between a client and a
Hmm.
PM. It would formalize some of the project plans and documents that we use, maybe. So, uh,
Yeah, it certainly is the promise, right? In terms of what you're hearing or even seeing in terms of AI being able to basically deliver the tools to speed up the process individuals like yourself do on a day-to-day basis. If you had a magic wand and AI could do what you would want it to do, what are your thoughts? Like if you could say, hey, if I could have X, Y, Z, this would make my life that much easier. Any thoughts there?
um, hmm.
Like,
I
where
mean,
do
I
you
don't know
spend the
that.
most time? Yeah, where in your kind of day-to-day job that's more manual or you just wish was off your plate, I guess is the best way to put it.
I would say project plan. Updating project plans, making changes to project plans can be a little bit tedious, and you're usually doing that after you discover new information. So, if there was a way to say have AI after a meeting update an action item or a project, an action item within your project plan, or create a new action item, that'd be pretty. I think a pretty cool feature or functionality. We just had a phone call with so and such client, and we finished our configuration process. If maybe we could, the AI could go into the project plan and say the market is completed, put an end date towards it, an actual end date, and then spin up the next action item, and then notify the next set of people that are responsible for that action item. That'd be, I think, a pretty useful feature.
Yeah, I definitely think that AI tools that are out there are kind of heading in that direction. Even more so, I would say being able to take in the various different data elements of previous projects that you might have worked on, maybe helping foresee like where there might be challenges ahead in terms of, all right, well, you're here on the timeline, but based off of the data set that it's looking at and its experience, if you don't complete by X or Y date, that might pose a challenge for other ones. So the ability and being able to digest more information and kind of lay out that roadmap for you. I mean, I think that's within the wheelhouse of current capabilities. It's just a matter of getting those solutions really built out. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So kind of moving into the tail end here of our conversation in providing advice for leaders, what is one mistake you would say companies should avoid as they're doing a net new HCM project or just integration project? What is the one mistake companies should really avoid doing when they start off on a project?
Is this in relation to using AI or just in general?
Just in general, yeah, just in general, I would say.
What should they avoid? Is the question.
Yeah. So if somebody you're
Um,
starting a new project, what should the companies kind of avoid in when they start a new project?
I would say they should probably try to avoid adding on additional requirements to a
Well,
project.
that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like it could, you're it wasn't built into what the initial goal was, or the initial plan was. So that does add some additional complexity for the PM and the sales rep and everyone involved. So I would say definitely having their, it's kind of tough to say because we want to sell the client as much as we can. But it does make it difficult when you can't close a project. I think it's important that we close projects out. And it's okay to pick up another project to start something, another initiative, if that needs to be the case. So I know some clients want to do everything at once, but maybe it's important that we get our core functionality integrated first, and then we'll start up another project to add those additional features or modules that you'd like. I've experienced that in the past where clients can be pushy, and they just expect us to be able to add an additional requirements midway through the project, and that just can lead to an issue. and it just opens you up to more risk. So I would say that if a client can avoid trying to change their requirements, or at least make sure they do it extremely early on, then we can avoid a lot of the headaches that I've seen, that occur in a project later on from doing that. So,
All right. All right. So here's the last question, and it's a little bit of a recap question, I guess. So thinking about everything we've talked about today, and again, giving advice for somebody who would be taking on a net new initiative in the future for the listeners on the call, if you could single down like one final message in terms of how people can be successful in a net new integration project or HCM project, what would you say?
um, I would say just make sure you have the right people involved. Make sure you have the right point of contacts when it's time for information to be exchanged. If the right people are there, or we know who to reach out to, that process can be a lot smoother. And be willing to, as a client, be willing to kind of let us take the reins sometimes when it comes to direction. It may seem like the flow of the integration implementation is a little off or strange, but RJ Reliance has a process that works. So it's important that the client, trust that process. And sometimes it may be a little painful or confusing to get certain information out of certain people, but we'll just know that we'll work through it together. And again, it's important to maintain those open lines of communication.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, Jabari, for the conversation today. Really looking forward to having more of these conversations in the future. So we'll touch on kind of differing points. And again, what you're continuing to see as far as trends in the AI space and how it's impacting, in particular, HCM projects. So again, thanks for your time, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to
All
meet
right.
you too.